Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review. Dan Deacon, America. Wow. Dan Deacon is an electronic music producer, singer, and composer. This is his latest LP, the follow-up to which was his breakout album, really, Bromst. Now, a lot of you older needle drops, not in age, but in viewership, may remember that I did not care for that album at all when it came out, and these days I still really don't like it. I mean, to me, Bromst is really the act of trying to shove 30 pounds of shit into a Ziploc. Just so many tracks on this LP are made up of skyscraper-sized layers of fuzzed out, glitchy, just very harsh and distorted, abrasive electronics, all arpeggiating very brightly all at once. Just not really an enjoyable listening experience for me. Plus, I didn't really think the mixing was all too good on that album either. Me personally, I prefer the much more raw and playful Spidermanoftherings. America is loaded with really bright tones, very sharp and rough textures, the kind of stuff that is just going to get you standing up at attention really quickly. Many tracks on this thing are a sensory overload, but not really a fulfilling one for me. It's really kind of like throwing crushed Oreos and Sour Patch Kids and Fruit Loops into a cereal bowl and then just pouring 4 Loko on top and then just digging in. And you may be saying at this point, Anthony, I agree with you to an extent on that description, or maybe all the way, but that's what makes Dan Deacon's music awesome. And that's when I feel like our two opinions are going to be at an impasse. And even though I don't really like Dan Deacon's most recent stuff, I do admire him for being a musician with his own sound, a guy who consistently gives his fans what they want and makes the records that he wants to make. But from my perspective, there are a lot of songs that he makes these days that just do not have a lot of balance. You get a lot of bright sounds, a lot of loud sounds, and they are just unrelenting to the point where it all just kind of ends up feeling like static to me after a while as I progress through a song, even if the beginning may kind of catch my ear or sound pretty good to me. However, I will say in comparison to Bromst, America is much more varied and features quite a few tracks that I like. There are some tracks on this LP where Dan Deacon is actually composing songs with traditional orchestral instrumentation, and it makes a lot of his compositions shine. This dude's approach to composing music is relatively minimal, a lot of very simple, repetitive progressions, melodies, arpeggios. It's basic, but also pretty beautiful when I run across a track on here like Pretty Boy, where you actually do kind of get some real live instrumentation, but mixed with electronics that swirl and glisten, don't glitch out and distort. And the way the track just escalates, it's really like some epic, progressive synth Vangelis Chariots of Fire type shit. It's synthetic, moving, and epic. Where Dan loses me is on a track like Crash Jam. The electronics on this thing are fuzzed out as usual, but to kind of add insult to injury for me on this track, he throws all of the least interesting sounds into the foreground and buries all of the better sounds underneath them. The vocals, the drums, the chords. The first half of this LP was kind of hit or miss for me. The second half is like a completely different section of the album. It is basically a group of tracks creating a suite that is titled after this album. And I'll be damned if the first movement of this thing, USA is a Monster, which may be a statement, or maybe a reference to the band of the same name, either way, to me, this is really one of the best tracks I've ever heard Dan Deacon make. There is an awesome orchestral intro on the song that should stop anybody in their tracks who's listening to this thing all the way through. The electronic glitches and distortions that Dan usually works with eventually make their way into the track, but they don't overstay their welcome, and as the song continues, they kind of get blended with that nice sounding orchestral instrumentation. I like that combo. Overall, the song does not feel as just obnoxious or annoying or as overbearing as some of his more electronic tracks can, like the next song on this suite, The Great American Desert. Eventually, the song ended up kind of sounding exactly like that, just a desert, a barren wasteland of just static that I'm not interested in hearing. However, the song Rail right after is just completely orchestral instrumentation, totally barren of electronics, and it is lovely. And it's just a great show of how Dan Deacon understands interplay and counterpoint when you can actually hear it. On the closing track, you have electronics mixed with a pretty epic gargantuan chorus, but the electronics just kind of come to the forefront and drown the chorus out. I mean, why? The electronics aren't even that interesting, especially at this point in the album when they are pretty much doling out the same exact sounds and timbres that you've been hearing for the entire album. Overall, I gotta say I'm torn on this album. There was a handful of songs on here that I felt like, wow, I mean, some of the best material I've ever heard Dan Deacon put out. I love it when he's just working with normal orchestral instrumentation, and maybe it would even sound great with him mixing it with the electronics if he had just more of a balance and not really one suffocating the other. But as you guys know, that's just my opinion. I'm feeling a strong 5 on this LP. If you guys given it a listen, what did you think about it? Love it? Hate it? Why? What should I review next? And remember, the good comment, the great rate, only the strong subscribe. Dan Deacon, America, forever.